AI gigant Nvidia nije uspela da impresionira investitore najnovijom projekcijom prihoda, iako prognoza za prvo tromesečje premašuje prosječnu procenu Wall Streeta. Dodatno, Nvidia se i dalje suočava sa neizvesnošću u Kini i nestašicom memorijskih čipova. A više o poslovanju Nvidije i širem AI tržištu razgovaram sa osnivačicom i izvršnom direktorkom Grenadilla Advisory Anom Rathbun. Hello, Anna. Welcome to Bloomberg Adria Connect. Nvidia reported great earnings, but not great enough, if you ask investors. It seems like investors are almost always unamazed by Nvidia's results, even if it tops estimates. Why is that?
Well, Nvidia is expected to beat estimates. And so investors aren't going to be impressed. And part of this is because Nvidia has had a great run for the last few years. And the valuation is way too lofty. So part of this is a little bit of a wait and see. The other part of it is that right now, the US markets, they're experiencing an incredible momentum that is stalled, right? So we've had a few years of markets doing nothing but going up, and then now it has stalled. And every narrative out there is negative. And I think Nvidia and other Max 7 companies have been sort of swept with this narrative. So some of this has to do with Nvidia. Some of it has to do with some of the negative narrative around AI. I don't expect this to last too long.
And Nvidia said it secured a license to ship a small number of its less advanced H200 chips to customers in China. It is great that Nvidia got this license, but China is world's largest semiconductor market. My question is, do you think it's good that US is limiting its companies on China, or could it maybe be a mistake?
Before the pandemic, and certainly before some of the disturbances we've had in the global markets in the last few years, I think the corporate goal has been to capture as much market share throughout the world as possible. In the world that we live in right now, that is not the goal. Because the US government is trying to balance, we want Nvidia to be successful throughout the world, but we have to balance that out with the national security interests. So I think this is a very difficult thing to achieve, this balance, and I don't know if we all know where that balance is. So what you're seeing right now is a little bit of a dance between the US government, Nvidia, and China, where you give a little bit and wait and see. And you also show strength by restraining a lot of the sales. And who knows where this will actually end up. But the goal here isn't to capture market share. The goal here is to protect the national security interests. And sometimes they don't line up. So I don't know if it's a mistake or if it's a strategy, but we can only find out as time passes.
So we will have to wait and see on that. But also there's a shortage of memory chips, which has held back the gaming division and made it harder to ship devices. Is this something we should be worried about?
So Nvidia's business has dramatically changed over the years. So gaming used to be a very big piece of their pie in terms of business. And over the last few years, the picture has changed, right? So I don't really see the gaming portion not being as big as a big detriment to Nvidia. However, the chip shortage is a real thing. That's a supply constraint, and there are bigger ramifications from that shortage. Number one, whenever there's a shortage, you're going to have price increases, right? So, and that has implications for not only consumers and other hyperscalers, but also for inflation as well. So I think that's a real big challenge. The other thing is, shortage just means that even if there's a huge demand, as we keep hearing from the hyperscalers, we keep hearing from Nvidia, if you don't have enough of the materials, you can't realize your sales. So, and Nvidia told us that they have secured a lot of the supply to last several quarters, and that's wonderful for Nvidia. But what happens after the several quarters? Because they also expect the shortage to continue. So this is going to be, I think, a problem for the industry and for a lot of these companies that would like to meet the demand but are not able to because of the shortage of chips and other materials, even energy.
So we've covered China chip curbs, we've covered memory shortage. Let's take a look at AI bubble worries. Investors are still wary of AI bubble and lofty valuations. Do you think this skepticism will continue, and should investors be worried about this, or should they maybe just be more careful?
Yeah, the AI bubble story, I think, is the narrative is in the United States only because some of this turbulence that you've seen in the markets is in the US. But if you look at the South Korean stock market, Kospi, it's up like 50% year to date, right? So this is a specific US story. Now, one thing about the markets is that the sentiment can be negative, the momentum can be negative, and the prevailing story around AI can be negative, but it doesn't last forever. So at some point, the valuations are going to get cheap enough compared to forward earnings that investors will come back and the narrative will shift. So that's just the nature of the markets. As for investors and where they should, place their expectations, I would say that instead of looking just at Nvidia or AI companies, I would also take a look at your goals, what your portfolio should be doing for you. Because ultimately, your benchmark for how your portfolio performs should be your life and your goals. And if you're an institution, your goals for the institution as well. So if you have a short-term funding need, you probably don't want to be in a highly volatile sector like AI chips or AI, software companies, right? But if your goal is much, much longer and the horizon is far out, then you can probably withstand some of that volatility and wait for potential gains. So a lot of this has more to do with your goals than Nvidia or any other AI stocks.
Anna, thank you so much for this interview for Bloomberg Adria. Toliko u ovoj temi dana u Bloomberg Adria Connectu. Ja sam Marija Jevtić, ostanite uz Bloomberg Adriju.